Hey y'all, Ramdino here, coming at you from North Carolina where the sun is out and spring may have finally sprung. Why do I think that? Well, my bees are bringing in pollen, the red buds are budding, and the Home and Garden Center is a total circus. Don't try to go there and get any kind of fertilizer or grass seed because you'll never make it out of there alive. And there ain't an aerator to be had in town. So most of the through hikers that are starting at Springer Mountain on the Appalachian Trail are heading to Katahdin by now. And they are well on their way, and it's time now for us section hikers to get together and get our gear together for the season. So if you've been watching any of the videos, some of you have been wondering, why are they walking around with them ski poles? Well, they're not ski poles, they're called trekking poles. And today we're going to talk about that. So if you're interested in what to look for in features to pick them out, stick around. All right, so let's talk about what a trekking pole is actually for. A trekking pole is for weight carrying and for stability. So for weight carrying, how does it carry the weight? Well, it transfers some of that load that would all be on your legs to your arms. So as your arms are moving forward and going back and forth, they are transferring part of the weight to your arms that you would normally have completely distributed to your legs. So that's a big help, whether it's going uphill, downhill, or on the flats somewhere. What else do trekking poles do? Well, they give you stability. So if you think about it, without trekking poles, you only have 2 points of contact to the ground. So you've got to maintain that center of gravity over those 2 points of contact, which are your feet. With a trekking pole, you're spreading that load, that center of gravity, out over at least one pole. So at any given time, you've more than likely got at least 3 points of contact, your 2 feet and one of your poles. So that's going to spread that load out and make you more stable. Another thing that trekking poles do is they keep you from falling down. You can catch yourself with them. So if you get ready to trip or fall over the many roots and rocks or slip that are out there on the Appalachian Trail, then you can catch yourself with a pole. The one thing that you have to be careful about with a pole is that you don't want to catch yourself and then fall on your pole. Ribs and poles do not go together. Ribs will be the loser just about every time. So you don't want to try to catch yourself and fall on your pole and break a rib. I have this innate fear that I'm going to have my pole up here and scratching something or scratching my nose, and my pole's going to be sticking out, and I'm going to hit a tree limb and jam it into my eye or into my mouth and break a tooth or something. So you got to be careful where your poles are at all time and how they're orientated. So let's talk about trekking poles when you're going on difficult terrain. So going up the hill, trekking poles are going to help you to pull yourself up the hill. You can reach up ahead of yourself and stabilize yourself and then put more weight on that. Coming down the hill, they really help stabilize yourself, particularly on those really big downs like coming from down into the knock, where a lot of times you're going to pole plant, step, pole plant, step, where you really have to step down, and the next step is maybe 16 inches, 24 inches down lower than your next step. You're going to have to lean on your poles then. And so those are the times you really need to be careful to make sure that you don't fall and you don't fall on your pole. But poles definitely help you in getting yourself up the hill and getting you down the hill and spreading that load out so that it's not always on your legs and always on your feet, and that so your center of gravity has a larger area where it can transition to and from. All right, so before we start actually looking at features on a pole, let's just talk a little bit about the materials that poles are made of. There's two basic materials that almost all poles are made of. That's aluminum and carbon fiber. Aluminum is heavier than carbon fiber, but it's also less expensive. Carbon fiber poles are more expensive, and they're also more prone to break. It is a fiber, obviously, and whereas aluminum is a little more forgiving and can bend somewhat. Carbon fiber can bend, but particularly in the cold weather, it gets a little more brittle. So there's a lot of information out there on carbon fiber poles and why people do or don't pick them. My poles are aluminum, mainly because when I first bought them, they were the cheaper version, or the cheaper material, but they've served me well for several trips, and I don't notice the difference between the weight. So I don't know how important that is. Some people would claim it's very important, and it may be over a 2,000 mile through hike. But on section hikes where I'm going 30, 100 miles, I don't think it's that important. So aluminum is a good bargain for me. Okay, so we know what trekking poles are for and what they're made of. Trekking poles are also made to be stored or stowed in a small area. So in other words, they collapse down so that you can strap them to the side of your pack without them getting in the way, or you can store them somewhere in a closet or somewhere so that they're not so cumbersome. So there's two ways that they are made to do this. The sections will telescope back up inside of each other, or the sections may actually come apart, and then you just put a rubber band or something like that on them. So for the sections the type of poles that come apart, there is one adjustable section on those poles, and they are held together with a cord that goes up through the middle of them, so that when you put them all together, that cord is drawn tight, and then you still have one section that is adjustable, so that you can adjust them to the proper length, whatever that may be for you. Then there's two other ways, when the poles are not breakdown poles, there's two other ways that the poles are collapsible, and that is either with twist locks, in that the entire shaft is in three sections, and as the pieces telescope out from each other, you twist them and that locks them into place. Or they have what's called cam lock. So as you pull the sections apart and they telescope come out from within each other, that you have a cam lock and you will lock that down. So let's look at each one of those. So we don't have an example of the twist locks, mainly because those are hard to find. They don't make those anymore. They made them for years. That was probably the first type of collapsible pole they made. However, they found that the twist locks tend to collapse or shorten, and they just didn't held up very well. So they came out with the cam locks. And cam locks, we'll see here in this picture here, the cam locks are made to where they actually, when you loosen them, pop open that cam lock, you'll pull the shaft out. When you get the shaft to the right length, then you will close that cam lock, and it grips the pole and prevents it from going back up inside of itself and shortening as you hike. So those are the two main ways that the poles are made to where they stay out. They bear your weight if they're not the breakaway type. Now the breakaway type also has the detent button on it, seen here, and this detent button locks in those sections as you put them together. Okay, so let's look at some features on a trekking pole. Not all trekking poles are the same. Not all of them come with the same features, and a lot of them come with a combination of some. So for instance, you may not be able to get all the features in a breakdown pole that you can get in just a normal cam lock pole. So let's take a look at it. First, we'll just start at the top down, and we'll look here at the straps. Straps are on there because the straps help you these are wrist loops, and you put your wrist through it, and what it does is it not only keeps the tracking pole on your wrist, but it keeps it locked in, so that when you're going up a hill, that you can lock that in and put more leverage back here on your wrist, and it just kind of helps to distribute the weight not only across your hands here and across your arm, but also in your wrist, and just to distribute the force that you're putting down there. So you might want them looser or tighter. Some people have a different way of doing it. So these are my black diamond poles, and the way you loosen or tighten these is they have a small cam place right in here, and it kind of goes back up inside of there, and in order to move that, you pull on this bottom section, and that will loosen that in there and kind of pull it to the rear. kind of hard to see here, but it's got some teeth on it that grip it. And then you can adjust it, either tighten it or you can loosen it. You do that with the top belt, and you can make it bigger. So it just depends on, you know, what suits you, how you want to walk with it. But then once you get it up there, then you pull on this bottom section and yank on it really hard, and now the whole thing loop is locked in, and you can put a lot of force on it, get it on your wrist for going uphill. So not all of them have that. Here's what Leaky looks like. Leaky has the detent button on the top, and this whole section pops up here, and then you can adjust it, pull on it, get it where you want it, and then push back down on this, and in that way that locks in the strap. And in my opinion, that's a better system than this right here. Actually, I've got a malfunction on mine, and mine do not grip as much as they should, and so my wrist straps loosen the more pressure I put on them, until they get to the point where I'm not putting any pressure on them. So that's something I've got to look into and talk to Black Diamond about. Okay, so the next feature on a tracking pole is the grip right here. So most grips are either plastic or cork, or some come in a combination of the two. Here's a Leaky pole. It has a combination of plastic and cork. This is a fully cork by Black Diamond that I use. I prefer the cork over the plastic, and the reason is because cork still gives me a good grip even when my hands are sweaty. And you might can tell looking at these that you know, there's a little bit of dirt and debris on them, but still I've got a good grip on them, and they'll absorb some of that sweat, and they just don't get slick like plastic does. So myself, I prefer the cork. Let's keep on moving down the shaft, and we'll see here this piece right in here. Now this is something that you don't see on every trekking pole. You usually have to pay a little bit more for it. But the thing that I like about this is this allows me as I'm walking up the hill and I have my grip on it like this, if I want to loosen, take that grip out and slide my hand down to this section here, particularly on tighter hills, now I've effectively shortened my trekking pole. And so on hills that have a tighter grade, steeper grade, I can move my my grip down, and I'm not so dependent on the trekking pole being the same height. You know, particularly going up a hill, if it's a really steep hill, then the trekking pole is just too long. So that allows me to slide my hand down the pole and still get a decent grip on this neoprene-like rubber material here. So I noticed in the Leaky breakaways, breakdowns, they didn't have that. So if you go to Leaky's website, they do have some that are like that, but the only ones that I could find at the local supplier, which is REI, the only ones I could find there, the Leakys did not have this at all. The Black Diamonds were the only one that had this. Now they also make a tracking pole that actually has an extended cork grip down here. Of course, you're going to pay a little more for that. So, but obviously, the more features you have on your trekking pole, the more expensive it's going to be. And of course, the carbon fiber is going to be the most expensive. So we'll look here right quick at these cam locks, and I talked about those earlier. The cam locks, basically, you pop the cam lock loose, and it just slides out like that, and then you pop it back down, and it keeps it good and tight in there, so that when you're putting weight on it, that it's not going to pop loose. Talked in an earlier video about how mine were shortening themselves on the trail. I think that was because of the screw here. I've tightened that, and we'll see how that is on the next trip out. Some of you may have noticed this reflective tape right here. Doesn't come on the pole. That's something I put on there, and the reason I put that on there is because, you know, if you get around a shelter and you've got 12 other people, it's more than likely there may be somebody carrying a Black Diamond there, and I don't want to get our poles mixed up. So I've got that. Probably nobody will have that marked in that way, and I can keep up with them. One last thing about these, this is called the basket. The basket's there to keep the pole from sinking any further down into the mud. These poles actually came with snow baskets that are about that big that I could put on there if I was in snow conditions. Don't plan to be, and even people that I've seen on the trail this year that are in snow conditions, they didn't switch their baskets out. So, but it's important to keep this on here. Also, as you go down the trail, you'll have leaves build up on the bottom of your pole. And they'll keep on building up until they just pack that thing. And so the basket also keeps them from just coming all the way up your pole. It'd be up to your wrist by the end of the day if you didn't have a basket on there. So that keeps that from happening as well. But it's mainly there to keep your pole, to give you solid footing in case your this portion of the pole right here, the tip goes down into the mud too much. The tips are replaceable. I don't know what they're made out of, but they are just, whatever they are, they must be made out of the same thing that black boxes on aircraft are made out of, because these tips right here have been on rocks and just all kind of debris and stuff, and they look like they're still just as sharp and as they were when they came on the pole. Well, if you're interested in any more technical data, any more specifics about any of these trekking poles and some other trekking poles, I'll put a link down into the description section where you can go and click on that, and that'll take you to Amazon where you can find some more technical data on them and dive a little deeper if you want to. That's it for this week. Hope you enjoyed it. If you did, give me a thumbs up down there. Love to have you as a subscriber by hitting that big old red subscription button there. And as always, and until next time, appreciate you. We'll see you out there. Okay, so we know what trekking walls are. Trekking wall. Cut.